Hello, welcome to Across the Pond podcast where I talk to people from around the world. Today I get to speak with Andrew. Andrew is an expat, which means he used to live in the States. He was born in the States and now he lives in Europe. He's actually a really, really awesome guy who decided to start his own tourism business. Goodness, mouthful. So listen to this, because we talk a lot about travel, like we do in a bunch of episodes, but Andrew has a different take on everything, given that he's not living in the States and then traveling. He's living in Europe and then traveling in Europe and doing tourist stuff there. So he's got some really cool little things that you'll probably learn about when it comes to traveling, if you want to travel, that is. He also talks about some really cool things about, he worked for ESPN for a little bit, so that's really cool. If you care about sports, some of that stuff is just interesting to hear about, so listen to that. But yeah, listen to this episode about Andrew. It was a blast. It was fun. I had a great time learning about Eastern Europe, learning about tourism. Here's Andrew. Andrew?
Yep.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Sounds like you got a good mic there.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. I have an Audio Technica mic, if you're familiar with hardware at all.
No, I'm not. I'm not going with. I started a podcast a couple months ago, and I got a mic that a friend of mine suggested to get. I'm not using it right now just because it's not kind of handy. It's easier just for me to plug in my headphones with the little mic on it.
Yeah, I get that. What mic did you get?
Let's see here. I will look at it. It's RODE, Rode or Rode. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Podcaster.
Okay. Yeah, the Rode is it's a pretty good microphone brand. A lot of professional people in terms of like actors and podcasters and even like movie sound people, they use a lot of Rode stuff.
Yeah.
So
okay, good. Well, my Slovenian colleague, he spent 35 years in radio, so
nice.
So he suggested getting that, and I could tell when when I'm talking into that and I'm listening to it, it's like, oh yeah, that's nice. But I still don't have it down yet. I think I need the crash course and like where you should put it and like how far away you should be from it, all that stuff. I haven't figured all that stuff out yet.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if it's a condenser mic, because there's a ton of different microphones. There's like a condenser mic, which is usually for more of like, your throat, like the microphone is almost in your throat kind of thing. And then you have the shotgun mic, which you might see more in like movies and stuff. Well, actually you shouldn't see it, but if you do, it might be a shotgun mic. It's the ones that are super far off the screen, but they're the ones that, sound really clear and stuff. And then you have a dynamic mic, which is more for like, like for example, like when I'm talking to you, I'm literally like on my microphone. I have the pop filter and then the microphone, so I'm right in front of it. But if I was to talk to you like this, it's kind of far away, and that's what a dynamic mic would be for, is a little bit more distance, but not as far as like a shotgun mic. So
no, I think this is what you have.
Dynamic or condenser, yeah. You have to be like right on it.
Yeah. Because my friend has the same thing, and when I've seen him on like the video version of like doing a podcast or whatever, he's got it within that very close to his mouth, let's say. I mean, when the camera's on the computer, you could see him and the microphone in the same frame. Yeah, I did some audio a couple of times for ESPN back in the late 90s, and I had like a parabolic, I think it was a parabolic mic. It's looks like the little kind of like semicircular like radar dish thing. I was out in the outfield of baseball games with that thing on, and it was like, that was pretty cool. But that was a long time ago.
Wait, so you worked for ESPN?
So I did I had a couple of buddies who moved to Los Angeles and worked in TV sports, let's say. Mm-hmm. So because I'm from Seattle, so when the Mariners were in the playoffs in '97, they're like, hey, do you want to work for a couple of the games back when we still had the Kingdom?
Hmm.
Yeah, so they put me on the crew, and I was like, I had no idea what I was going to do, and I was out in center field with the parabolic mic. And it was great because that was when Ken Griffey Jr. was the center fielder.
Oh.
So I had a couple of plays, like, he was jumping up against the wall for some balls and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And there's actually a photo. There was like Sports Illustrated, hey, baseball playoff coverage, back before you would read it all online. And there's a photo of him like jumping up in center field for the ball, and there's like three guys on like let's say a elevated platform above center field, and I'm in that photo with like two other tech guys or whatever. That was like my 2 days of like 2 days of doing like sports tech stuff, and I made it into Sports Illustrated. So I figured, quit while you're ahead.
Wow, that's really cool. I've always wanted to be one of those guys, who, regardless of what I'm doing, I just kind of want to be there at the game. I'm a huge soccer fan. I love soccer. And so it would be so cool to me to be like the sidelines and everything, right behind the referees, doing all the mic stuff, like handing the ball to people. So you kind of took my dream from me. That's really, really cool. Did anything ever like come from that? Like, were you able to maybe go down the whole ESPN sports road anymore, or was it just kind of like a small game?
Put it this way, like if you want to make your living doing a sports gig, and I'm gonna like say preface this by, this is all pre-COVID stuff and pre like whatever tech they have now. But back then it was like, if you wanted to do it full time, you kind of really needed to be in California, probably be in LA, or at least like have all your connections there, kind of be connected with all the different I don't know, whoever the people who are making up the rosters, and who's going to cover what game and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If you were like living in Seattle and you were like kind of connected, like if I wanted to pursue it, I probably could have done more sports in Seattle. But of course, it's just like, hey, if we're coming to do the game of the week, if we're up there doing the Seahawks or the Sounders game of the week, then maybe you can get on that. Or if you go, like I was down in Los Angeles for New Year's, like 97, 98. And that was when the Washington State Cougars were in the Rose Bowl, which was like the first time I think they'd been in the Rose Bowl, or first time since forever. And so my friend's like, hey, do you want to work on New Year's Day? And I was like, sure. So it was like same thing. I had no idea what I was going to do. And I was the guy who was holding all the cable for one of the cameramen on the sideline. So I was right on the field the whole time.
That's so cool.
It was insane, because what is that? The Rose Bowl is like, I don't know, 100,000 people. Yeah. So that's, twice the size of, whatever the sporting events are in or stadiums are in Seattle. It was, massive thing, and it's super loud, and half the stands are red for the Cougars, and I forgot who they were playing, but then the other half are that color. And you're just running along, and people are getting tackled like right in front of you, and you can hear everything. So that was cool. I mean, I don't know, maybe it loses its charm after a while, probably, like everything is just a job. But when you do it just for a little bit, it's certainly like, especially if you like sports, it's just cool, because you see things and hear things you never get to see just from TV or being at the game.
Yeah, that's man. I don't know what to say, because that's just so neat. Do you get any like special perks and stuff because you're working there? Like, can you go into like the locker rooms or something like that, or do you get like even maybe like a free food pass, or is it literally you just show up, do your job, and then you leave?
For food, I'm sure we were fed. I kind of remember more like on the football game, like New Year's Day thing, because you have halftime. Football is different. You got halftime. I'm sure
True.
I got some food. Baseball, I can't really remember, but probably before or after there was some drinks or food you can grab. But with and I think it probably depends on your job. Like, obviously there's some cameramen or sound people probably in locker rooms or other places. So if you're part of that team, yes. But what was it like? So after the game, and the Mariners actually lost the game. I think they lost both of the games at the Kingdom during the playoffs. But I was there, you're cleaning up stuff, or you're taking cables down, or this or that. You're working after the game, and I saw like Dan Wilson, who was their catcher, and a few other players, in street clothes coming out of wherever they were coming out of to go to the elevator and stuff like that. So, you definitely have a chance to bump into people, or certainly, oh, hey, there's so and so, like without the uniform on.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know, and I have no idea. Like you said you're into soccer, so I don't know how all that is, but you might have a chance to, just probably depending on what job you've got.
Yeah. And then real quick, it was the last thing I'll ask about this, but what was like your favorite part? Was it just kind of being there, or was it, like, did you actually enjoy the audio, part of it, or like what was your favorite?
Yeah, well, one, it was really cool just to like, I can't believe I'm doing this, because I went to the Kingdom not even knowing what I was going to do, and I thought for sure, I'll probably have the boringest job, like, okay, make sure this is plugged in and that plugged in. So just being there and the whole atmosphere, and then you're not in the seat, you're just in this, you're right behind the outfield wall, but what was cool was, you got your headphones on, and those parabolic mics, you listen to people. So I was listening to Griffey and Puner, or Griffey and whoever's playing left field, just chit chat in between batters, or when they're coming back from the thing. Yeah. And that was cool, because that's why they're there. You can get all that great sound. You point in the right direction, and you're like spying in on people. Mm-hmm. So that was it was all really just like, oh, this is awesome. I mean, in some ways, maybe it's good that they like weren't winning, so I wasn't like overexcited. I was kind of like, okay, I've just got to be professional and follow the cues and whatever. It wasn't like I'm like, yeah, or something like that. Yeah. And like, be like, shut up, buddy.
That's so cool. That's really neat. So real quick, I shouldn't say real quick, because this might take a while, but like, what you say you have a formal education in video communication.
Yeah, I mean, I got it. It was a 2-year program at Seattle Central. So I don't know if I'm going to use the word formal. I guess formal, but mm-hmm. It wasn't, it's, yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that. Like, it's 2 years, so it is something, but it doesn't feel like something, because it wasn't, the typical 4-year. I kind of get that. I understand that a bit.
Yeah.
So what did you want to do with that?
I wanted to do something with film, for sure, back then. And it is kind of difficult, because that was, 25 plus years ago. But I think going into it was like, I want to do some film stuff, because when I was a teenager, I did a bunch of things just on video, and some Super 8mm stuff, actual like film, mm-hmm. Some animation, things like that, experimental stuff. Made a couple of really horribly cheesy, funny, and grotesque zombie movies on video. That was fun, because I was basically into makeup effects. So mm-hmm. when I was I don't know, probably like a senior in high school, I remember getting the brochure for the whoever's academy it was in Hollywood, some makeup academy, thinking, oh, maybe I should go there, maybe I should do that, because mm-hmm. I thought makeup and special effects, that was something I was really into. Yeah. So that was when I was in the video program. That was like maybe 4 years later or something like that. And I still like that kind of stuff, mm-hmm. but it was just like, I don't know, let's do something kind of filmy. I wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm going to do TV sports, but there's the reality versus the, oh, I want to make films, versus the, I want to get paid and not work as a waiter. So if I do, if you want to do TV sports or some other things, for a paycheck and have more job security, then, there's that's probably a more realistic option.
Yeah. So how do I say this? How far did you go from when you graduated to actually like continue in that line of work? Like, did you do video editing and making it, because you said you made some movies and stuff, but so like how long did you use that for?
Not very long. I think it was within a couple of years. I knew like, hey, if I want to, let's say, use my degree and work in TV, or be down in LA and do something while I'm hoping to be a filmmaker or whatever, a script writer or whatever it would be, like, you have to be in Los Angeles. I think certainly you have to be in California. And I grew up in San Diego. And I kind of felt like I had my time there already. Like I said, I had a couple friends who moved there, and it was great, because if I went down there, I probably could have found work, because, already, had some ins or whatever. yeah, I guess I thought I knew what I wanted, but
Mm,
I didn't, until travel
yeah.
came along. I really was like, oh, maybe this, maybe that,
Hmm.
different things. And then it was like, okay, thank goodness I found travel, because now I know what I want to do.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So then, what did you end up doing after you kind of realized? Because of course you said travel and stuff,
Yeah.
but does that mean like you decided that you were going to like film traveling, or does that mean that you decided that you were just going to stop everything you were doing and just travel and have fun and explore the sites, or kind of like what was your goal after you kind of had this realization of I don't want to do filming anymore?
No, I mean, I always had a day job. I always had an office job. I worked in legal, so there was always a lot of work. There was always
Oh, okay, okay.
good pay. So even when I was in school, I think because that program was mainly like nights, evenings, and then Saturday afternoons.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think I was working. If I might not have been working 40, but I was working 30 hours a week, at a day job. So that was my always thing. Like, I need to work. I need to do something. I need to make money to have money for whatever I want to do.
Gotcha.
So no, it was more of once I went traveling, uh, and then got the travel bug, and then decided, okay, I'm going to try to do something with travel, and I hope that works out, because there wasn't anything else that was like, oh, this is what you could do your whole life. If it those you get to a certain point and you feel like, well, I should know what I want to do, or like, I know what I don't want to do. And so
Hmm.
when it came to, okay, I love traveling, I want to find a way, like, how can I travel and get paid for it? That was when I was like, okay, I'm going to go down that road, and I hope it works out, because I wasn't really sure if there was something else up my sleeve. you
Mm,
know or
yeah.
if I was just going to resign myself to saying, hey, whatever, I'll just work at a job that I don't really care about.
Hmm.
You can get paid well, and you could have a life out of that, obviously. But I was looking for something. I think I was looking for something, and I didn't know what exactly it was. But then I found it. When I found it, I was like, okay, this is it. Now I just have to, make it work.
Gotcha. And then what was that? What was that thing, like how did you make travel? Especially, you're a little older than I am. And so being, back in the day when people are like, yeah, I want to try and figure out how to travel and make money. How did you travel and make money given, social media wasn't necessarily a thing, and YouTube and all this other stuff? How did you figure out to make that work?
Well, the only thing I mean, the only realistic thing I thought was, the only thing that I had control of was like, okay, how about I start some tours? I'll run some tours, and I'll run tours
Hmm.
to places most people have never heard about. And of course, this is all okay, maybe Facebook was around and YouTube was around barely, but
Hmm.
certainly it wasn't like nowadays,
Yeah,
where
yeah, yeah.
you've got this saturation of travel on social media,
Oh yeah.
uh, and bloggers and vloggers and YouTube channel and all that stuff. And it wasn't like that. Which, okay, in some ways that was more difficult, but in some ways there's an advantage to it, because it wasn't just like, oh, I'm trying to be a face in this crowded field. It was like, okay, well, if I could somehow get this off the ground, it can slowly work its way into being something successful, and then I'll have experience at it. And so, I mean, really, what running tours is really not at all like, there's, other than maybe I do some writing or maybe I make some videos, it's not travel blogging or vlogging or anything like that. It's quite different.
Hmm.
Um, so I just kept at it. I guess that was my thing. Was like, I liked it. I thought I was good. I thought I was good at it based on what people told me, and the experiences people had, or the fact that I had people that were saying, okay, could we go with you next year if we go on a tour?
Hmm.
So I just figured I'll just keep at it. But it's not some kind of overnight, like, oh, I'll start this business, and 6 months or a year from now it'll be super successful, and then I'll just know and bank on it.
Hmm.
So it takes a long time. I mean, maybe it's a little different. Well, once again, pre-COVID might be a little bit different in recent years, but I still think it's something that takes a while to get off the ground and to get a reputation
Yeah, yeah. What were some of like your first areas that you went to? Like, were you more localized in terms of the states, or were you more, in the area that you live in now, the European area, or was it
Yeah,
kind of?
Oh, I don't do anything in the U.S. I mean, I've done road trips and stuff like that in the U.S.
Hmm.
So yeah, no, I've only, it's like this actually. A lot of people from the U.S. work as guides, tour leaders, or whatever over in Europe, and I know there's people in Europe that go to the States and they take people from Europe over there, so they probably see more and know more of the States than I do,
Hmm.
and on the other hand, like I know a lot more about places in Europe that than a lot of Europeans do.
Yeah.
So it's a little ironic. No, I just picked the two countries that I liked that were next to each other that made sense. That was Slovenia and Croatia.
Hmm.
And back then, okay, Croatia wasn't Game of Thrones and Dubrovnik and on the
Hmm.
cover of every travel magazine, but it wasn't completely like off the grid. I mean, it wasn't completely unknown. It was certainly showing up in travel magazines and stuff like that. Just nothing like it's been probably the last 5 to 7 years. So it wasn't like I was trying to sell some, remote place in the middle of
Yeah.
nowhere that's never had any press. But at the same time, most people, if they're going to go to Europe, it's Italy, then Paris and London and other places. So,
Yeah.
that was, but that was, I mean, that's what I like. Those are the
Hmm.
places I know and liked. So, and when I started, this is 2005. I mean, obviously anyone could sell Italy if they know it, if they have a way to sell it. But so many people were doing that. I figured it was better to take a chance trying to sell places that didn't have much competition as far as who was running tours there, rather than trying to, I'm going to have my version of Italy tours, and you're up against 100 or more, tour companies. So
Yeah.
I figured I'd just kind of do my own thing with what I'm interested in, and with the challenge of the fact that I'm trying to sell places that are not very well known.
Yeah, and I think your idea behind it all is good too, because for example, if you take YouTube, or you take any sort of online presence nowadays, it's really hard to get into that area, and I feel like the same goes at least with the travel business. Like if you were to try and do Paris, or Portugal or Spain or Germany or London, anywhere, it would be kind of hard. So you kind of have to go to those places that aren't as populated, that aren't as well known, because that's really the only way that you're going to be able to, get some sort of business, because people are going to be like, man, I wonder what's there. Like, why is this guy advertising, Croatia? Like, that must be kind of cool if he's doing that. Let's try that. And then not to mention, you don't have a lot of other people that are doing that. You don't have these big companies that are saying, yo, let's go there. That sounds like a cool idea. They just want to go to the popular places where everyone else thinks that they're going to go.
Yeah. And when you're, selling someplace new or very different, then if you stick it out and you make it there, then when it becomes more popular, you're like, oh, I've been doing this now for 15 years.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like, whereas like a lot of people could be like, oh, I just started doing tours here a couple of years ago, because before a couple of years ago they didn't know about it,
Yeah.
or they'd never been there, or they're busy in other, selling other destinations. I mean, there's plenty of destinations to sell, and there's plenty of people who go to all sorts of different places and want different things. Not everyone's the same, obviously,
Mhm.
and everyone has different styles of traveling. So a lot of it is just trying to figure out what's your style, how you want to do things. And then there's probably a match somewhere. Like there's probably people that like that the way you like it. It's just kind of finding them and getting the message across.
Yeah.
So that's what I found, because I'm not selling, on volume. It's not like, oh, if I could run, 20 tours with 35 people each every year, whatever, like that's not what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And so it takes a little pressure off when you're not trying to be too big, and
Yeah.
you're also saying, well, I'm going to do things very specific and very kind of boutique. There's an audience for that. It's just kind of connecting with that audience is probably the challenge.
Yeah. So you're still doing this right now, or I should say, before
Yeah.
COVID, you were still doing this, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
This year will be unfortunately this year is my 15th anniversary of having tours, and I'll have no tours in 2020 for obvious reasons. So,
Yeah.
but whatever, that's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but it's like, hey, you survive this and you get through it, and
Mhm.
that's just something later on. I'll probably be like, well, okay, if I made it through 2020, then I can make it through whatever the next
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
disaster is.
Yeah. So before, and you know, I don't want to speak on COVID, and I know neither do you, so I'm trying to stay away from that. But I am kind of curious. Before, you know, COVID and everything, what was like your average amount of tours per day, and average amount of people? What was kind of like, you know, of course you don't have to give a monetary
Yeah.
number. Like I'm not asking for that. I'm more so just asking, you know, like, for lack of a better term, how popular was it? Did you feel like you were actually getting a decent amount of people and it was growing a lot over the years, or was it kind of just something that was like it's there, if that makes sense?
No, it was like it being like just there was probably the first, I don't know, 6 years or so.
Hmm.
Because one thing, I wasn't doing it full time because I didn't live over here, so I lived in Seattle, and and for the most part I kind of had my day job to go
Hmm.
to, and then I would come over to Europe 2 or 3 times a year and run a few tours here and there. Um, and it was kind of like I couldn't do anything more because I didn't have the time to grow. And if I did grow, I really needed to be on the other side of the pond,
Yeah.
so to speak, to do it. So things changed when I decided to move here, because that was like, okay, now I could do it 365 days a year, not actually running tours 365, but the whole business and working on it. That's it. Like I'm not doing anything else.
Yeah.
There's not, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week committed to other things. So then that was when I figured, I mean, when I moved here in 2014 to Slovenia, I should say, because I don't know, we haven't mentioned that yet, but I'm in
Hmm.
Slovenia. When I moved in 2014, it wasn't like, okay, I'm up to speed and now I'm going to have a full time business, because it was still like, well, you got to move here and then get it up to speed. But at least I was in the driver's seat to kind of focus just solely on that. But I'd say the last 4 years, I've gotten to a point where it's like, okay, this is, now I know I can survive. And now I know not just survive, not just like, okay, I made it through and I didn't have to, like, buy top ramen every day to eat
Hmm.
or whatever. But, say, okay, I'm doing well. I've got, money I need every year. I've got money I could put away for savings, and I'm growing. And that could be either I'm doing more tours, or I'm doing more people per tours, or the tours I do, I'm making more, I make more money with
Yeah.
less work, which is always a nice thing too. The last couple of years, I tried to cut down the amount of tours I was actually leading, because
Wow.
when you're a one man band, you
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of get
Yeah.
to a point where, okay, you can't just keep growing. If you keep growing and you try to do everything yourself, then something's going to break down.
Yeah.
So kind of the time I'm on, let's say if I'm leading a tour, I'm gone for, let's say, normally 10 to 15 days. That's a big chunk of time, and when you're doing that, you're kind of focused just on that tour and not much else.
Hmm.
So that was kind of what I've been looking to do, was just, okay, cut down the amount of time I'm actually kind of gone and on the road, so I could, manage things and maybe do more tours, but not actually lead them all. But that's fine, because, I've got to wear many different hats.
Gotcha. Gotcha. That's actually that's really cool that you, well, first, you know, you realize the fact that you're a one man army, if you will. You can only do so much. You know, a lot of people bite off way too much they can chew. But it's really cool to hear that, you know, your little travel business, if I can say little,
Yeah.
was growing so fast that you actually had to cut back. You know, because a lot of people that try and start their own businesses, a lot of them, I would assume, don't really make it to the light of day. You know, like they kind of go for a little bit, and it's like, oh, you know, it fizzles out. But yours was booming. What, if you don't mind me asking, what other countries did you do? Because of course Slovenia, and I'll ask you
Yeah.
all about Slovenia and stuff here in just
Yeah.
a second. But you know, like you said, you do Slovenia and Croatia. Have you thought about maybe expanding? And if so, you know, like what countries do you want to go to?
I do. I have tours in other countries. So Slovenia and Croatia, that's what I start out with. I do things like Bosnia and Montenegro, because they're all basically
Ooh,
neighbors
yeah.
with Slovenia and Croatia. I do a little part of Italy, because Slovenia is right next to Italy. I mean, I can get in my car and be in Venice in about 2 hours and 15 minutes or
Wow.
something like that. So I'm doing some things, let's say, close to me. I've done stuff in Bulgaria, Romania, the Caucasus, which is like Georgia,
Hmm.
Armenia, Azerbaijan. And I've done a few things here and there: Hungary, Poland, Czech. Let's say pretty much anything that's Central and Eastern Europe, or not considered Western Europe. I've for most of them, not everyone, but
Hmm.
I've done some things in. So now, if I'm if I'm not super busy because I'm always on the road leading tours, then that gives me more time to actually go to other places and put tours together.
Mm.
So that was part of the whole thinking too, was like, I want to offer other places, not, I mean, some just because of I'm interested in going to other places, but the thing that some people don't think about is, people can have an amazing time on, let's say, come to Slovenia and Croatia, and some of them can come back a second time. Maybe they see some things they didn't see, maybe they see some new things.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to get people to come back every few years, you have to have different destinations. That's
True.
just that's the thing that I kind of realized early on when I had a few clients that were definitely like, okay, we like this style of tour, we trust you, like what else can you put together? And so, of course, you need some time to go to these other places, and you want to make sure you like them, because
Mm-hmm.
the one thing I would never want to do is put a tour together in some place that I really don't like. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I've cooked this, I have this dish on the menu, like I think it tastes terrible, but I'll serve it up.
Yeah.
People.
Yeah. You don't want
like
to
if
do
you
that.
had a restaurant.
Yeah.
It was like, that's not really what I want to do. So so I mean, I'm definitely, and I mean, I have a, in this 2020 time where you're not going anywhere, I've spent a lot more time thinking about what I want to do, like in the next 3 years, what new places might want to do. And I've got the time to read books, do research, send out emails or call up people and make contacts. And, hey, when things open up again, kind of have my priority list of like, okay, these countries I've got contacts in,
Mm-hmm.
I'm really hot to go here, or so-and-so told me about this place. And so, yeah, I mean, like, that's like kind of now the next generation of like where my brain's at, is thinking, where else do I want to go? What other destinations do I want to sell? And it takes a little bit of time, but at least like I've got the ball rolling on those things.
Gotcha. And you said with the clients that you've had, at least early on, they said that they like this style of tour. What do you feel like differentiates yourself between some other sort of tour business? Are you more in terms of like you go to the smaller, less known areas, or like what do you feel like is that one or two or three things that really makes you stand out?
Well, up until recently, I was, most of the biggest groups I had was 6 or 7 people. So really small. Like some people are like, oh, small group means whatever number it means. And I'm like, okay, that's a big group for me, because, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like 6 or 7 people, which means you can take a group of friends, you can take 2 or 3 couples that travel together, or a family, things like that. So you've got like that group size, which dictates other things too, because when you have a small group, then you certainly can pick places. Let's say you want to stay at a farmhouse. So there's a nice farmhouse. They only have 4 rooms, and they cook dinner for you, and they grow all their own food. Awesome experience. But you just can't take you can't even take like a 20-seater bus there, because there's just not enough room.
Mm-hmm.
So mainly, I mean, some of it is a group size and all the things that come with that. If you go to a winery and you do a wine tasting with the winemaker, if there's 6 or 7 of you, that means you've got way more time to interact with someone, and they have more time with you. If you've got 40 people, you're probably not even going to talk to the winemaker. You're going to be talking to some kind of assistant person, because it's you can't. There's just certain experiences you can't have when you get to a certain size.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is just what I focus on. I did focus when I started this was just more off the beaten path places. Well, my official company is Roads Less Traveled LLC, so I just figured Roads Less Traveled was pretty obvious. If people saw that, they kind of knew what the tour is going to be. So some of it was like, okay, the countries we go to are not as well known, but in those countries too, just doing more things, smaller places and things like that, rather than big places, bucket list type of places. And some of these countries, they're not really made for bucket lists. So it's like more small things add up to like a greater picture. Like, oh, we do all these little things that are like add up to something really great, rather than we're just trying to see these big highlights or something. And some of these places don't even really have that. So it's like, if you're just like, I want to see the Colosseum, and I wanted to see the Eiffel Tower, and I want to do this and that, some of these places don't have that. So you need to kind of structure the way you run the tour differently anyway. So kind of those factors probably were and the fact that like, hey, I put all this together, I customized a lot of things for these for different clients. When you had small groups, sometimes it was just all people who knew each other. So, let's have an extra day here, or let's add this destination there. And
Mm.
so then they trust you. And let's face it, I mean, if you're, when you're traveling, you're buying your plane tickets, you're spending a lot of money on the tour. That should be like the best, that should be the highlight of your year. So the people who like traveling and went with me, I think they're like, okay, if we're gonna, we're gonna make, a destination every year or every few years,
Hmm.
then for certain places we'd go with Andrew because we already know him and we know that we like the same things he likes and that he
Mm.
could, that we could trust him to do it. So I think that was a key thing because it was always just me. It was like me talking with them and then
Yeah.
me meeting them. It wasn't like there's, my assistant in the office who they don't ever meet and they get generic emails from. So when
Hmm.
you have a dialogue for let's say 12 months before you meet and then you spend 2 weeks together, then you've got this kind of history with them. And it's just like I said, it's a really big investment. It's not like other businesses where, if you open a restaurant, okay, I might plunk $50 down there, but that's not the same as buying, a $3,500 tour plus airfare.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like the idea of going to a tour that's more personalized, if you will, if that's a correct terminology, because
Yeah, yeah,
you do get a lot of people who sign up for tours, and let's just say it's in London, right? And then there's like 50 other people, and you're all just walking around, big giant group. Not to mention you have all the locals looking at you, and they're like, man, look at those tourists. You get that
yeah.
negative feel, and then you get the person who's not very personable, the tour guide who's not personable. So when you have the few people like you're saying that are in your tours, there's more of a sense of connection there. Not to mention they can kind of pick your brain a little bit and go off the beaten road even more if they want to. Oh, Andrew, like we're in we're somewhere in Croatia, wherever it is, just whatever, we're in X city, and you're taking us to all these cool places. What about some other place? Like, do you know of like maybe like a pasta place or a different winery or something like that? You're like, oh yeah, I know that. And then you go off the road even more, and so you get to experience so much more than the one person who's just like, hey, so this is Big Ben and this is the eye, thank you for your money, have a good day. It's so much more personable than that.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny because one of the things that I remember hearing back from the city guides I would get. So you go to, if I have a tour and it's 14 days and we've got like 4 or 5 cities you go to, I have a local guide do the walking tour around there. And I found it strange that, I mean, it's strange in a good way that they would always say afterwards, like, "Oh, I enjoy your guests so much. They always listen, they ask questions."
Hmm.
Because if you are in any city that has big tour groups around, you just need to take a look for 5 minutes. You could see how many of those people in that group are tuned out.
Yeah.
They're taking photos. They're not paying any attention. They're not following the guide with the umbrella or
Hmm.
whatever around. And I feel kind of bad. I do feel bad for like the local guides because like, man, why am I'm talking, I'm giving like, I'm trying to, and half the people or more than half the people aren't even paying attention to it.
Hmm.
So I thought that was like, okay, that's a really nice compliment to get that from the local guide saying, oh yeah, like, when's your next tour? Like, I want to be your guide for it because your people always, and it's true. I mean, it's not like all travelers are in the same bucket for sure. There's going to be those people who are like, my wife dragged me on the tour and I don't really care. Up to the, oh, I've been everywhere and I'm super passionate about traveling and I want to know everything. And it's like there's all these different kind of grades of travelers. And if you have a really good grade of traveler, that makes everything easier because they also want to get along with each other and they
Hmm.
want to know more and all this stuff. So it makes it easier, to actually have them as guests than if you've got, let's say, just kind of generic travelers and some people aren't really into the whole experience.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm kind of curious. So I want to change gears just a little bit. So
Yep.
you said that you were raised, or like you lived a majority of your life in San Diego, and then
Mhm.
you moved up to Seattle, and now you're in Slovenia.
Right.
Like, how does all of that go from point A to point B? Like, what was kind of like your process? Like, oh, why Seattle? And then all of a sudden, like, well, I shouldn't say all of a sudden. You probably thought about it for a while, but why Slovenia? Like, what was your thought process through all of that?
Well, I think I mean, I grew up in the suburbs in Southern California, and look, it was 80s Southern California. I'm not going to complain. That was a lot of fun. Like
Yeah.
I'm not going to wish I grew up somewhere else in a different time period. That was
Yeah.
great. But I kind of think like, okay, that's nice, but that's just like, that's not my, let's say, my place. Like I'm not that I could go back there and visit friends and family and enjoy it. But it's like, I want to go somewhere else. And I've been to Seattle after I got out of high school. I just traveled around, visited some relatives, and went and saw different places. And I stayed in the city. And then I was like, ooh, Seattle seemed like a big city. Now, I guess technically maybe San Diego is bigger than Seattle, but when you're in the suburbs, then it doesn't feel very big.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I want to live in the city. And Seattle seemed to be, I mean, I moved there in it's the summer of '89. So this was, right before, or maybe right during, like everyone from California was already moving there.
Yeah.
It was like a year and a half or so before Nirvana and the whole grunge thing, and like Seattle became this epicenter of like culture and what have you.
Hmm.
But it was just like, I don't know, I liked it, so kind of I'll just move there and see what happens. So, but that's more my personality of like, okay, I have this idea, I'm going to go for it. And then,
Hmm.
whatever. I'm not going to think too much like what happens if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But after 25 years in Seattle and spending a lot of time, let's say let's say 2005 to 2014, before I moved to Europe, it was, the more time I spent traveling, the more time I felt like I wanted to be over here, and I felt a little less and less connected to Seattle. So, hey, I was there for almost 25 years. That's, nothing to sneeze at.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, it's just time to move on. So, I mean, in some regards, I mean, I've lived in 3 different places, and that's not much. I mean, they're very far away from each other,
Yeah.
but there's certain people who probably, they might be your age and have lived in a lot more different places than I have. And for me, it was like, okay, well, this is my next step, and we'll see how it goes.
Hmm. Gotcha. So then what was like because when I think of Europe, if I was to move to Europe right now, I'd probably want to move to Germany because I studied abroad for 3 months and I love Germany. I was in Regensburg for a bit. And so that area is just beautiful to me. I would love to live there. There's something about it. But what was kind of like, because when you think of Europe, you don't think of Slovenia. You don't think of Croatia, really. You think of, the more basic areas like London and Paris and Spain and Barcelona, yada, yada, yada. But what was your desire to go to Slovenia?
Well, that was where, I mean, if I'm running tours here, it would make no sense to me to live anywhere else other than the
Oh,
places
okay.
I was running tours at. I mean, yes, of course you could. I mean, obviously, like I could, everything's close by. So hey, I mean, Munich, I could probably Munich to the capital of Slovenia is like 4 hours drive,
Yeah.
6 on a train. So, by American standards, it's not very far away. By
Yeah.
European standards, it's a little bit longer.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I could have done something like that, but the thing was, since I'd been here so many times, I felt like, oh, I could move here, and it's not going to be some massive shock. Like you could imagine moving back to Germany because you've already been there, so you kind of
Yeah.
know what to expect. Even though it was only 3 months, and for me, it was like 1 week here, 2 weeks there, 10 days here, but whatever. I had enough time when I wasn't just doing my tours to feel like, okay, I think I have a pulse. I have the pulse of this place, and I think it would work for myself and my family.
Hmm.
So, because I think, and you might agree too. I'm sure you traveled to other places when you were in
Yeah.
Germany, other than Germany, and
Yeah.
there's places you liked, and you probably think like that's a place I'd go back to visit again. But could I move there? They're 2 totally separate things. And for me, I certainly didn't feel like I needed to be in a big city. So that was another reason why maybe other places in Europe were like, well, I don't need to be in a big city. And big cities, rent's more expensive. Cost of living in general is always more expensive in a bigger city, or certainly Germany's cost of living is more expensive than Slovenia's cost of living.
Yeah.
So there's other things like that to take into consideration. And then I just feel like, moving to a new continent, let alone country, when you've got a family, that's a huge thing. It's not like you moving from Seattle and moving down to Portland.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, it's a little easier to go back to Seattle. When it's across the ocean, it's more difficult. So I figured I'm going to go with something I know and feel confident in.
Hmm.
And so I think that was the right approach. and also just living in a place where it's like, okay, hey, if nothing else, the cost of living here is less, so I don't have to make what I made in Seattle to survive in Slovenia.
Gotcha.
Which I think is a tip for anyone. If you move to Europe, if you could earn in, if you're working for some company in the U.S. and you have a U.S. salary, and then you're living in certain places in Europe, you could either live on less, or you could do really well, because the average, salary here is a
Mhm.
lot less than it would be in Seattle per se.
Gotcha. So, and you might have already said this, and I just am not remembering, so I apologize if I'm just asking the same question. But so of course, with your travel business, you say you want to start a travel business, and then, you decided to go wherever. What, was the reason for wanting to go to Eastern Europe?
Well, I had traveled here. I mean, I'd spent 6 months traveling abroad when I turned 30. That was my 30th birthday
Oh,
present to
okay. Gotcha.
myself.
Gotcha.
And I was like, I'm just tired of everything. I'm going to go travel for 6 months. And most of it
Gotcha.
was Eastern and Central Europe. I spent about a month in Italy because I had friends in Rome, and, whatever. There's a lot to
Hmm.
see in Italy. So, but I just figured it kind of goes back to like, ooh, but I like these other countries, and they don't
Okay.
have, not everyone's running tours there. So why not go there? And I certainly know them better than other places.
Yeah.
So that was why. I don't have any, like, I don't have heritage here or anything like that. It's
Hmm.
not like, oh, I'm, Slovenian American or Croatian American or
Yeah.
something like that. It's just, that's the way it just worked out. When you kind of go to a place and you feel like, oh, this place is for me. This place fits me, and some other places you go to might be like, oh, this is nice, but it's not my cup of tea.
Gotcha. Because I was thinking under the whole time that like you just randomly chose Slovenia. I didn't, like I wasn't sure like how you kind of got there, because I was like, Slovenia is a really weird place to kind of just pick. Like if I was to take a dart and throw it at a map and it was to hit Slovenia, like that would be the only way that I can think of you ever going there just out of the blue. Not because it's not beautiful or anything like that. It's just like you don't hear a lot of people going to Eastern Europe. And so, hearing that you took this trip when you were 30 is, of course, the reason, which is kind of cool, because you don't hear a lot of people wanting to go to Eastern Europe, because you only get those people that are like, yeah, I'm gonna go to Germany, and then I'm gonna go to London, and so the whole Eastern European thing is just a really cool idea to me. I
Well,
wanted to
yeah,
travel there, but
20 years ago, it was more like that. Now it's not. I mean, Budapest, Prague, those are places that are on everyone's radar. Everything in Croatia now is on. Delta had direct flights from the U.S. to Dubrovnik for a whole year. They would have had them all this year, at least during the season, but
mhm.
because of COVID, they didn't. So things have changed a lot now too, with where people go to. And also, that's also to some degree, it's more of an American thing of like, hey, I'm going to go to Italy first or Germany first or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas like I have about 35-40% of my guests are Australians and Kiwis from New Zealand,
Oh,
and they travel a lot more. So by the time they come to me, they're like, oh, we've been to Italy 3 times and Spain twice, and this place, this place, this place. That's just within Europe. Outside of Europe,
gotcha.
they've seemed to, you know, been to many other places. So also for them, they're more like, oh, they're more in tune with like, oh, I heard, X country, Slovenia, Croatia, or Sarajevo is a really interesting capital, or whatever it might be. They seem to know more and be more like ready to go to these countries because they've already been to so many other places, and they mingle with other travelers from
Yeah.
Australia, that they're like, ooh, okay, now I'm going to go here, because they know people in the US, because you have far less percentage wise of
Yeah.
people travel international and even have passports, that like if you're a big traveler in the US, you might not know as many other travelers, and those people might just go to like like, hey, I'm going to see Italy and France, and then I got a trip to Morocco and a trip to Japan or something like that. But with Australians, they're just like everywhere.
Yeah.
But kind of like Germans are. If you make friends in Germany, you'll notice that Germans travel all over Europe.
Yeah.
So if you're in Germany, it's probably a lot easier to go to these countries because you for sure know someone who's already been there. And I
Mhm.
think with Americans, it's getting more that way. But it started out with like, well, we don't know anything about Slovenia or Croatia or Romania or whatever. And it just takes time. I mean, it's like everything else, it's not like everyone's going to wake up one day and know, oh, here, I should go here.
Yeah, and no, the mindset behind even traveling to Europe is just, at least in the States, being here and wanting to travel and listening to some of the people that have traveled. It's just, I want to go to London and that's about it, or I want to go. They want to go to those more popular, just more basic areas because that's what they think traveling is. I've spoken to a couple people who have been, to the Polynesian islands, and they've been to Africa, and they've been to, almost everywhere, anywhere you can think of. I've talked to people that have, passed through there or something like that, and they say that a lot of the time people are just so confined to that bubble of Europe is so beautiful, I want to go to Europe. And when they think of Europe, they just think of France, And so it's just, I wish that more people had the mindset of just kind of taking a risk, if you will, and just trying to go somewhere. Because, I mean, to be fair, a lot of people, like, for example, I went to the Czech Republic when I was in Germany. I was able to travel for like a week here and there when I was studying abroad, and decided to go to Czech Republic for a weekend. And like, when you go to that city, it's really pretty, but you can also see just like I'll say the nastiness that communism had on it, because it's only recently that the Czech Republic's come out of communism, and you can still see, some of the places are struggling just because they're trying to, adopt this whole new ideology, this whole new economy. And so it's very interesting to see the I'll say history and stuff behind those places. But then it also makes sense because people don't want to go to a quote unquote dirty area, or, a place that's not as well known, because they're scared. Because, a lot of people, especially Americans that are traveling, they usually do carry a lot of money. They usually are super bougie and whatnot. They look bougie. You get only a few people who actually understand travel. They have the backpack on, they kind of just wear normal clothes, something that's not, like super high end and whatnot. But then you also hear those horror stories of, oh, I was in blah and I got blah, 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 and I got mugged, or, I got stolen or pickpocketed from, And so I think it's just that idea that people are like that. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, because people ask, like not as much anymore, because I mean, now if people want to go travel with me or travel before, they kind of know how it is. But before it was like, oh wow, we're going to Bosnia. Like, one, is there still a war going on? And like, two, are there landmines around or whatever? But I think actually, and this is something I know, and I'd say most of my guests know, and all the people I work with in these countries know, if you're in the non-Western part of Europe, it's always much safer. The terrorists don't blow shit up in Zagreb, in Dubrovnik, in Budapest. All that stuff, it's always France, UK, Spain, Germany. I mean, I live in Europe for 7 years. There's always something going on in Germany. I mean, not on a grand scale, terrorist stuff, but small stuff. And same with like pickpockets. I mean, I live in Slovenia. I don't lock my doors. I haven't had to lock my doors in the 7 years I've been here. I live 20 minutes from Italy. So if I go to Trieste, Italy, which is like 20 minutes drive, so it's like you going across to Bellevue or something like that.
Yeah.
They've got bars on the windows going up at least five stories.
Wow.
Here you're like, oh yeah, you don't see that here. And if I told someone in Italy, oh, I don't lock my doors, they'd be like, yeah, well, like we do. Even in like Czech Republic, I found out, oh yeah, we always lock the car parks at night. If you park your car at the hotel or whatever, it's outside. And I was like, wow, that's strange. Like everywhere I travel in the Balkans and Southeast Europe, Slovenia, Croatia, any kind of former Yugoslav place, I would never, it doesn't even cross my mind. So there's the perception of like, I don't know much about it, so maybe it's more dangerous. But in reality, like, man, if you're going to get pickpocketed, it's going to be in a train station in Italy way more than it's going to be like, I'm going to be walking on the streets in one of the cities I go to, and someone try to do something. It's just, it's more rare. So it's one of those cases where people like, and once they travel a little bit more, then I think they realize that. But once again, like we're talking, going back to the whole like grade of traveler, there's all these different types. A lot more than the person who's just going to go to the UK. It's like, I just want to go to London, like you were talking about. There's all these different types of people who read more and know more before they go, and make decisions based on, like what's the reality of the situation versus like, oh, I don't know much about this country, it must be dangerous. So like I said, there's all these different kind of grades of travelers out there. And I usually just deal with like the people who are kind of like in my class. Or in my grade. So fortunately, I don't have to spend too much time, going through all this, because those people aren't interested in what I'm selling anyway. So as I always say, it's like my own filtration system. It's like those people are filtered out because what they're looking for is not what I'm selling. Therefore, I don't have to deal with them. And it's like, it's good for me. It's probably good for them because they might not really want this experience that I have to offer.
Yeah. And no, I when I was traveling in, the more populated areas, because when I first went to Germany, I was like I kind of at least want to see the sites to say that I've seen them, that it kind of makes sense. And so when I was, in the train stations and, even in the airports, some of the areas London, Paris, I was in Switzerland for a bit. Switzerland wasn't as bad because I feel like the Swiss are just more of a kind people. Anyway, so like when I was in these train stations and bus stations and stuff, like I was scared in the more populated areas. I was worried that like something was going to happen. But when I was like in the middle of, Germany, or I was, in the less populated areas, like I was up in Sweden and stuff, and like I felt totally fine. I didn't feel as scared because there wasn't like, there was a lot of people, but I think it was just that kind of what you were saying earlier, that, it's the idea that when you go to the more populated areas, there's more people there. There's more, terrorist stuff there. Not to say that like, stealing is terrorism, but it's just that whole idea. There's more people there, so more stuff can happen, and then you go to these less popular areas and it's just, you feel safer because you might not know what's going to happen. You might not know if there's high crime, but I think it's just that mindset of it's not as popular.
Yeah, and anywhere you have a lot of mass tourism, you're going to have more crime. I mean, you're going to have people wanting to take advantage of that, whether it's like pickpocketing or thief stuff, or just price gouging.
Yeah.
Things like that. Like, oh, here's your bill, and you had 2 slices of pizza and a Coke, and it's 45 euros. It's like, okay, like that stuff. Like I never deal with that. A friend of mine who's my tour guide in Montenegro, and Montenegro has something like 700,000 people. So, just super, super tiny country.
Yeah.
She's like, we don't have any thieves here because, with 700,000 people, if you're a thief, you're basically going to be stealing from some relative that or friend, because there's just so few people there. So like theft is something. I'm not saying these places don't have problems or don't have crime, but like theft and violent crime, I think anywhere in Europe, certainly violent crime anywhere in Europe is less than it is in the States. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing too, which a lot of people think like, oh, is it safe there? It's like, man, it's like, I don't even watch too much US news, but it's pretty obvious, just by glancing here and there, it's like, it's probably a lot less safe where you live in America than whatever place you're considering going in Europe.
Yeah. What would you say would be a travel tip or something like that? As a tour guide, of course, you probably have a lot of them, but what would you say if I've never been to Europe before? I'm 22. I have my grandfather passed away. I have a lot of money, whatever it is. I have a lot of money and I want to go to Europe and I want to travel, but I know nothing about it. What would be like a tip or two that you would say, hey, you should do this, or you should bring this, or you should go here? Like, what would you say?
Well, one thing I'd say, like, you should do a little research, reading, whatever. Hey, if you're the kind of person who's like visually stimulated, then, spend a little time on social media, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Find stuff that way that looks interesting to you. If you're, more old school, like, hey, get some guidebooks or whatever, or read. You could still find, plenty of things online. But one thing, it's kind of like anything else. Like, just because whatever, here's the top 10 most popular movies this year, might not be the 10 movies you want to go see.
Yeah.
So, that's why he's like, do a little research. What looks interesting to you? What do you want to see? Do you want to see, I'm looking at a picture of Regensburg right now because I haven't been there and I just pulled it up. It's like, wow, that looks awesome. It's like beautiful. If I'd never been to Europe, like that, or something I've seen in Prague, is definitely things I want to see. Now, some people, and that might be appeal to someone who they've never heard of Regensburg, and they're like, yeah, that's what I want. So maybe do a little bit of research because you want to figure out what you want to see. The other thing too is just don't go see only capital cities. Like, yes, because one, the capital city in a fair bit of the countries is not the best city to go to, arguably. And you also want to get capital cities can get really same, and it's great to see something. Regensburg, I'm guessing they don't get the people that Cologne does and
Nope.
Berlin does and
Yep.
Munich does for sure. So in some ways, and this is another kind of tip, and you might have found this out, when you go to places that don't have a lot of tourism, then you're treated differently. You're not just like, oh, here's this number. They're coming in for a day trip, or they're coming in for one night, and let's make as much money as we can off of them. You might have a better chance of actually making some more real connections. So it's good to plan to go to some places that aren't just capital cities. And then of course, if you want some nature, or if you want some beautiful, kind of hidden town, those aren't going to be capital cities anyway. So you definitely want to kind of get off the big city kick and do that. And let's face it, it's not like everyone is just born as a big city person.
Yeah.
So there's so much variety. But like I spent 15 months, more than 15 months before I went on my 6-month adventure to Europe. And that's all I did for 15, 16 months. I just bought travel books. I just went on, Lonely Planet's website that's got you could ask questions or whatever. I would just read stuff. And I knew I had way more time than most people did to plan stuff. But I really was like, okay, these places seem cool, or these places everyone talks about, but let's read about other stuff. And to be honest, that's how I found Slovenia. I saw this book, Lonely Planet Slovenia. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty cover. And I picked it up and I was like, no, where's Slovenia? Because I could tell everyone, when I live here now, it's like, yeah, it's like the first time I heard about Slovenia was when I picked up this book and said, I want to go here, but I don't even know where it is.
Yeah.
So, that's like, and, it's like, hey, I picked up a book, 20 years ago or 22 years ago, or whatever it is. And now I liked it so much I moved here. So you kind of never know what's going to happen. And I think people, rather than just be like, oh, so-and-so says you should always go to like Rome, Paris, and whatever first. It's like, that's not for everybody, because everyone doesn't have the same taste. So, I think do a little bit of research.
Yeah, no, I would love to reiterate that, because thing is like, I would argue that seeing, Big Ben and, the Eiffel Tower, like, that's really cool. Like, I'm not trying to downplay it when I say it's a more basic area, but everyone goes there. But I do feel like it's really cool to see, because it is, a pretty big landmark. A lot of people do boast about it. So it would be cool to go see. But I would love to reiterate the fact that if you go to the smaller cities, a lot of the times, tourists don't go there. And so when you are there, you are treated in a different light. There was one time when I was in Regensburg, I went to this tea shop because my wife, girlfriend at the time, really liked tea, and she really wanted to get a tea set, or like a teacup, And so I was looking around for her. Long story short, I didn't find anything. But when I went to this tea shop, and I walked in, the guy, started speaking to me in German. I was like, hello, like I try to say in German, like I don't speak German. I'm, from America. And he's like, oh, you're American, and like we bantered back and forth for, 5 minutes. And he was just like, yeah, like I've lived here for so long. It was just really nice. And that connection that I made was really cool, because I went in a few more times like, oh, Daniel. I was like, hi there, how you doing? And it's just really cool to build that connection with someone, even if it doesn't last, a lifetime. If it's just, the week or two that you're there, you have that awesome connection. And then not to mention, people are, and I think I already said it, but they are going to treat you differently. They're going to be nicer to you. They might give you, like a discount or something on a donut or whatever it is. Like if you go into a sweet shop, or you go into a specialty, some sort of food specialty or whatever it is, that might give you a discount just because you took the time to converse with them. You're like, why? They might ask you, why are you here? And you're like, I just found it on the internet. It sounded really cool. Oh, that's really cool. You should go here. And then they give you tips about all this stuff. So I would love to reiterate the fact that go to the smaller areas, just because it might not be necessarily popular on the internet or amongst, influencers or whatever it is. You should definitely go there, because you get to meet awesome people. You get to see amazing sights that most people in the world don't get to see.
Yeah, and then that's the other thing, like you mentioned, with the you get some tips from locals. That's great. Like, oh, it's like, because no matter how much you read or you kind of sift through on social media, there's a bunch of places you're not going to know about. Even I'm always like, what's this place? Oh God, gosh,
Yeah.
I think I've been near there before, and I can't believe I've been there. But it's great to get some tips, even if it's just like in Regensburg, like, oh, there's this festival going on next weekend or whatever it is. And if you live, especially like, if you were living there, for a period of time, it's really great to connect and get those inside tips, which of course now it's a little easier to find online, but now because there's so much information online, that's a whole other problem. There's too much information, and it's great just to get it from the guy who's like, hey, if you like this, then you need to go to this other shop, and they have this that you might really be into or something.
Yeah, and then they also don't take advantage of you. That's another thing I noticed. A lot of people are just super kind, and they didn't take advantage of me. And I that could be an ignorance thing, but I would like to assume that, in the smaller cities that I visited, people are just more kind. They were more caring. They didn't care as much that I was a tourist. They're just like, oh, like, how you doing? So it's that mindset, of visiting the smaller places, the smaller towns. It's definitely worth it. I would like to ask one more question, Andrew, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One more question, and I like to ask everyone this question that comes on the show because I feel like in the world, there's so many different people that have so many different experiences, and their experiences definitely help manifest what they value most. And so, with you, of course, being in Europe, you've seen, the differences in the American life and the European life, Eastern European life, Slovenian life. So, what would you say would be like a piece of advice, or like a saying, or some sort of, something that you've held on to that you would like to pass down to someone else?
Well, a couple of things, but although it's not really so much like what I've picked up from, let's say, Slovenia or living in Europe. But in this day and age, like the words thank you and thanks should just roll off your tongue, especially if you're going traveling.
Yeah.
Like if you have a difficult time saying thank you, like sit in front of the mirror and practice it a while.
Yeah.
It's the gratitude goes a long way. It's like it works in every language and every culture. It's a nice currency to have. Just being thankful, and I think people always open up more, or just to appreciate that would be like one thing more is, let's say, a kind of a travel thing, and just being like a better human being. The other thing that I would say that's just my piece of advice for like, okay, what was one thing that helped me get to where I am now is even though it's counterintuitive, like if you've got some dreams or plans, like don't have a plan B. Because I always tell, like, my plan B was like there was no plan B, so plan A has to work.
Yeah.
And that's what I've realized, especially, and this year is be the prime example. It's like, hey, I can't, it's like I gotta make it work. It's like you gotta survive this no matter what it takes, because you just don't have any other real good option. And it's kind of good to just be like, I got to go out and do it and make it work, and just have kind of the confidence and faith that, like, no, this is my dream, this is my plan, and some way, somehow, I'm gonna make it work. And it was like that's what I kind of did to move here, and that's probably what I've told myself a lot this year too. Is like, okay, I want to stay where I'm at. I don't want to kind of give everything up and just fold my tent and go home. But I think that'd be a good piece of advice for people kind of going for something. Maybe if you're going for something big, it's just remember that.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot, and I won't add on to it. I've been doing my best to try to not add on to what you're saying, because I don't want to try and downplay the fact that like that's what you said. But I will say this. Thank you, Andrew, for speaking to me for this hour. I'm really sorry over the course of the last like week or two how times have kind of changed and stuff. I'm sorry if it's a little too late or something for you. Being over in Europe and all. But thank you, for being flexible and working out. I really did have a fabulous time. Just learning about you and learning your business and whatnot. Would you mind once we hang up? Would you mind sending me an email with any sort of link or anything that you want me to post?
Yeah, sure.
Whether that be, your website for your business or your podcast. Speaking of podcasts, do you want to promote that a little bit? Just kind of tell us what it is.
Sure. It's I started about two and a half months ago. It's called Eastern Approaches. It's anything travel, food, culture, politics, history that's related to Central and Eastern Europe. I'm doing it with another American expat friend of mine, Ben, who lives in Prague. The two of us, we've spent probably 40 years combined, if not more, maybe 45 years in, let's say, half of Europe traveling around. And we talk about anything and everything related to these countries. Sometimes we interview people, expats, or other people that are just interesting folks. And we're actually doing like online pub trivia once a month now in kind of like a live stream version of the podcast. So it's not for, if you're traveling here, or if you're thinking about traveling here, or you've been over here, or you just want to hear about some part of the world that you probably don't know anything about, tune in for an episode and see if it's your cup of tea or not.
I'll definitely listen to that. I'm always on the search for new stuff to listen to, so I'll have to give that a listen because I want to learn more about Eastern Europe, because that's the one thing that I sadly wasn't able to experience when I was over there was Eastern Europe. So what I'll do is I'll have to try and schedule a tour through your thing, and then maybe we could do something like that, because that'd be sick. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, and I'll definitely send you all the links so people can check out the podcast. Sure. And this was actually very good for me, because I know you've been, I don't know, to be honest, I don't know how long you've been doing the podcast, but I know you've been doing it longer than me. And I don't usually do interviews. Like, it's not like I do interviews all the time. So this is very educational for me to go through this process. So I appreciate that, Daniel.
Yeah, of course. I've been doing this for, I think I published the first episode middle of September. So I've only been doing it for 3 months or something like that. But the whole thing has been in the works for about 4.5, maybe 5. So it's been a process, but it's been fun. I like I said, I love speaking to different people from all around the world. My goal is actually to speak from someone who is, I'll say, living or is from every country in the world. So, I can cross Slovenia off my list. So it's definitely a huge thing, because there's 270 something countries in the world or something like that, maybe a couple more.
That might take a while, but and you might need some like whatever bobblefish or live Google Translate on some of those, but that's an interesting thing. Well, anyway, it was informative for me to kind of go through this process with you, so I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. It was a pleasure. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. I should say the week coming up, and I'll for sure check out your podcast and everything, and then we'll kind of go from there. If I ever need a tour or something like that, I'll for sure hit you up and we can try and work something out.
Okay, sounds good, Daniel.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your night.
All right, you too. Ciao.
Bye-bye. Andrew is an awesome guy. Sorry if that seemed a little rushed. I'm trying to keep the episodes right around an hour 15. If I go longer, I go longer, but I try and do my best to keep it right around that time. So if it felt rushed, dude, Andrew, I'm really, really sorry. I didn't mean to rush it like that. Just kind of something that I'm trying to mentally do. And, sometimes you'll ask a question and then it just opens up a can of worms, and there's so much awesome stuff that can come from it. So if it was rushed, really sorry. But I really did enjoy our time. Thank you for, opening up my eyes, at least, to Eastern Europe, and just kind of expanding my knowledge about all of that and everything that comes with that. I wish the best for you and your business coming in the coming months. With the vaccine and stuff coming out, hopefully that can really boost your tours and stuff. And I wish you nothing but the best in that, because I do feel like you're doing an awesome thing, opening the eyes of the rest of the world to everyone else. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Across the Pond. If you enjoyed this episode a lot, please check out some of my other episodes. I've had some great conversations with a ton of people on a variety of subjects. If you know of a friend or a family member, or even maybe that one person that's not really part of your family, but they are, like that uncle, and you think that they would like an episode, please share it with them. I want to thank Mark for the logo, and I want to thank the Black Couch label and All EH for the music. And I want to thank you, the listener, for giving this about an hour and a half of your time. I really do appreciate it. I want to ask one more thing of you. If you can, on whatever platform you're listening on, please leave a rating. I have episodes that come out every Sunday and every other Thursday. Tune in next time for another awesome episode of Across the Pond.